"Woman, go live your own life. Leave ours alone." Those were the words my son shouted in front of everyone. I stood there in silence, but my eyes said everything. 3 days later, he received a letter. I had already moved overseas, but before leaving, I left him a note that shook him to his core. My son screamed those words for everyone to hear, right there on the sidewalk, with neighbors watching from their windows. Some even stopped watering their plants to listen better. "Woman, go live your own life. Leave ours alone." His voice echoed down the entire street like a slap to the face. I just stood there, my hand still gripping the handle of my floral fabric purse, the one I had sewn myself 15 years ago. My eyes didn't shed tears in that moment, but they communicated everything. They told him that something inside me had just died. 3 days later, Brandon received a registered letter. When he opened it, all color drained from his face. I had moved abroad, but before I left, I had written him a note that completely devastated him. And if you're still here wondering how a mother reaches this point, how a 70-year-old woman finds the courage to disappear from her own son's life, then stay with me, because this story will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about family. Before I continue, if you enjoy real accounts like this, stories that show it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because here I don't tell victim stories, I tell stories of women who decided to fight back. My name is Eleanor, and I need to go back in time a bit for you to understand how I arrived at that moment, standing on the sidewalk, hearing my only son call me a woman as if I were an old piece of furniture cluttering up the living room. I've always been a seamstress. Since I was a girl, I learned from my mother how to make perfect stitches, how to transform scraps into something beautiful. When my husband Thomas died in a motorcycle accident, I was only 32 years old, and Brandon was just 6. I thought the world had ended. I remember the funeral, the smell of white flowers that made me nauseous, the weight of holding my little boy's hand while people whispered, "Poor thing, so young, a widow." But I didn't want to be pitied. I wanted to be strong. I took my mother's sewing machine, set it up in the living room, and started making clothes for others. Party dresses, school uniforms, alterations. I worked until my hands hurt, until my vision blurred from staring at those tiny stitches. Brandon grew up watching me work. He did his homework at the same table where I cut fabric. We ate rice and eggs many times, but there was never a lack of love, never a lack of conversation. I used to tell him, "My son, we don't have much, but what we have is ours, and no one can take away our dignity." Over time, the sewing business grew. I opened a small workshop. I hired 2 women to help me. It wasn't luxury, but it was enough to live comfortably. And I had one dream, to see my son graduate, see him in his cap and gown, receiving his diploma, because I never had that. I stopped studying to get married, and Thomas didn't have it either. But Brandon was going to have it. When he got into college for business administration, I cried so much I soaked the acceptance letter. But the tuition was private, $2,000 a month for 4 years. I did the math. It would come to around $96,000 total with adjustments. I didn't have that, but I had the apartment my mother left me when she died. A simple 2-bedroom, but in a good location. I sold it, and used the money to pay for my son's college. I continued living in a rental but with a full heart, because he was going to be somebody in life. And he was. Brandon graduated, got a job at a logistics company, started earning well, continued living with me until he was 28 years old. We had a good relationship. He took me to the movies, sat with me on the couch to watch television, called me his queen. I remember one day he came home with a box of chocolates and said, "Mom, everything I am I owe to you." I treasured those words like precious jewels. But then came Jessica. She entered Brandon's life like a gust of wind that messes everything up. Beautiful, I'll admit. Straightened hair, nails always done, designer clothes. She worked as a manager at a cosmetics store. When Brandon introduced her to me, I tried to be nice. I made a chicken pot pie, set the table, put out the crocheted tablecloth I had made, but Jessica barely touched the food. She stayed on her phone making subtle comments. "Oh, Brandon told me you sew. How charming." The tone wasn't complimentary, it was mocking. I swallowed hard, tried to ignore it. After all, she was my son's girlfriend. I wanted him to be happy. They got married 2 years later at a wedding I paid half of, $9,000 on my part. Jessica wanted everything top of the line, fancy venue, imported dress. And I gave it because it was my son's wedding. And mothers do that, right? Mothers give. But from that wedding on, everything changed. Slowly, but it changed. First came the visits. I would call to schedule going to their place, and Jessica always had an excuse. "Oh, Eleanor, today doesn't work. We're going out. Today the house is a mess. We're tired." Brandon agreed with everything she said. He started calling me Eleanor too, instead of Mom. Small detail, but it hurt like a needle sticking in. Then came the granddaughter, Sophie, my beautiful little granddaughter with brown eyes just like Brandon's. When she was born, I wanted to stay at the hospital, help. But Jessica said her mother would stay. There wasn't room for me. I held back the pain and waited. When I could finally see Sophie at 3 weeks old, I held that little baby and promised I'd be the best grandmother in the world. But Jessica wouldn't let me. Visits started to be scheduled. I could no longer show up by surprise. I had to call ahead, confirm times, as if it were a doctor's appointment. And even then, many times I would arrive and Jessica would make up that Sophie was sleeping or fussy or sick. I would go home with a heavy heart, hugging the cloth doll I had sewn for my granddaughter and could never deliver. But the worst hadn't happened yet, and it was precisely that worst that brought me to that day on the sidewalk, hearing my son humiliate me. But for you to understand the blow I took, I need to tell you what happened before. I need to tell you about the money. You know that saying, you can't judge a book by its cover? Well, anyone who looked at me back then saw a 70-year-old retired woman living in a rented house in the Riverside neighborhood. Anyone who saw from the outside thought I was just another grandmother who spent the day watching game shows and watering ferns. But inside I carried a story that weighed more than a bag of cement. I built my life alone. And when I say alone, I'm not exaggerating. After Thomas died, there was no friendly shoulder, no help from relatives, no government paying bills. There was me, my sewing machine, and the certainty that I needed to raise my son with dignity. I remember the first year without Thomas. I woke up at 5 in the morning, made coffee and bread, got Brandon up, dressed him in the uniform I sewed myself, because buying ready-made was too expensive. I took him to school, rushed back, sat at the machine, and worked until it was time to pick him up. And when he slept, I continued. Many nights I sewed until 2 or 3 in the morning. My fingers bled from so many needle pricks. My spine ached from being hunched over, but I didn't stop because I had a purpose. I looked at my son sleeping with that angelic face and thought, he's going to have a better life than mine. He's going to study. He's going to be somebody. As Brandon grew, the workshop also grew. I managed to rent a small space, about 400 square feet, and hired Linda and Jane to help me. 2 hard-working women just like me. We produced uniforms for schools, party dresses, outfits for neighborhood stores. It wasn't an empire, but it supported 3 families. And for me, that was a lot. Brandon saw me work. He grew up there among fabrics, threads, the noise of machines. I always talked a lot with him. I sat on the edge of his bed at night and told stories, not those about princesses and castles. I told stories of struggle, of people who didn't give up. I talked about my father, who was a construction worker his whole life and never stole a brick. I talked about my mother, who raised 5 children washing clothes for others. I wanted him to understand the value of things, and he seemed to understand. Brandon was affectionate, hugged me before sleeping. When he got sick, I made soup, and he said, "Mom, you're the best cook in the world." Silly little thing, right? But to me, it was everything. When he entered adolescence, he continued being a good son. Didn't cause trouble. Studied, got good grades, helped with household chores. I was so proud of him I felt like I would burst. I showed his report card to everyone. Look, my son got an A in math. I was that type of annoying mother who thinks her son is perfect. And then came college entrance. Brandon wanted to do business administration. He dreamed of working at a big company, wearing a suit, having a solid career. I supported him, helped him study. I bought study materials that cost an arm and a leg, and when the results came out, I'll never forget that day. He came running home with the paper in his hand. "Mom, I got in. I got in, Mom." We jumped around hugging, crying like two children. I remember I called Linda and Jane, and they came to the house, brought soda and cake. We celebrated until late. It was one of the happiest days of my life. But then came reality. The college was private, tuition was $2,000. I did the math. 4 years, approximately $96,000, not including materials, transportation, food. It would come to close to $190,000 total. I didn't have that amount. The workshop provided enough to live on, but not to save that much. I spent a few days thinking, looked at Brandon, saw his happiness, saw the apartment my mother had left me when she died. 2 bedrooms in Oakwood, simple, but on a quiet street, well located. Worth about $200,000. I didn't think twice. I put it up for sale. When I told Brandon, he was desperate. "Mom, don't do this. You'll be left with nothing." But I held his hand and said, "My son, this apartment is made of bricks, but you're made of dreams, and dreams are worth more." He cried. I did too, but the decision was made. I sold the apartment for $195,000, paid for college in full up front, got a good discount. There was some left over that I saved for emergencies and continued living in a rental. The little house where I am to this day, or rather, where I was until recently. 3 small rooms, dirt courtyard, a fruit tree that bears fruit every year. Brandon graduated. The graduation ceremony was in a big gymnasium full of people. I went alone, sat in the back, but when they called his name and he went up on stage in his black gown smiling, I felt that everything had been worth it. All the sleepless nights, all the pricked fingers, all the tight budgets. It was worth it. He got a job quickly, started as an assistant at a logistics company, but was soon promoted. Started earning well, about $5,000, then $6,000, then more. He bought a used car, a white sedan, and continued living with me. He paid part of the rent, helped with groceries. We had a good routine. We went to the movies every month. He chose action movies. I preferred comedy, but we always compromised for each other. Then we'd go eat at the diner. Simple things, but they made my heart warm. He called me his queen, said that one day he would give me a house, that he would take me to see the ocean, that he would take care of me when I got really old. And I believed it. I believed it with all my strength. Until he met Jessica. It was at a barbecue with friends from work. He came home that night with a different sparkle in his eye. "Mom, I met an incredible girl." I smiled. "Incredible," he blushed. "Really incredible. Beautiful, intelligent, full of plans." I was happy. My son deserved to be happy, deserved to love and be loved. I just wanted to meet her. And there began the first knot in my throat. The first time Jessica came to my house, I went all out, cleaned everything until it shined. Made chicken pot pie, rice casserole, milk pudding. Put out the crocheted tablecloth I had made by hand, the white one with blue flowers. Arranged flowers in the vase, put on perfume. I wanted to make a good impression. When she walked through the door, I noticed the way she looked around. A quick look, but evaluative. She was really beautiful. Long straight hair, perfect blowout, impeccable makeup, designer clothes. High heels, even though it was Sunday lunch. She shook my hand lightly, as if touching something that might dirty it, and said, "Hi, Eleanor. Nice to meet you." "Eleanor?" Not Mrs. Eleanor, not ma'am, just Eleanor. We sat down to eat. I served the food all excited, telling how the pie recipe was from my grandmother. Jessica took a tiny piece, poked it with her fork and said, "Oh, how charming. Brandon told me you sew, right? Must be tiring." The tone wasn't solidarity, it was pity or contempt. I don't know, but it hurt. During lunch, she barely ate, stayed on her phone. Brandon tried to make conversation, but she responded with monosyllables. When they left, I washed the dishes with a tightness in my chest. I tried to convince myself it was her being nervous, that next time would be different. But it wasn't. With each meeting, I felt Jessica saw me as an obstacle, as someone outdated, behind the times, who had nothing to add. And worse, Brandon started to change too. Little by little, but he changed. He stopped calling me Mom and started calling me Eleanor. He also stopped telling me things about work, stopped asking me how my day was. I tried not to care. It's a phase, I thought. He's in love. Soon it'll go back to normal. But it didn't. And then came the wedding. And there began the real hell. The wedding was beautiful, I won't lie. It was at a venue with crystal chandeliers, tables decorated with white and gold flowers, everything very fancy. I felt out of place the whole time. I wore my navy blue dress, the only formal one I had, and low-heeled shoes that pinched. But I was happy. My son was getting married, starting a family, and I, as a mother, just wanted to see him smiling. Jessica entered the church in an imported dress, something that cost $12,000. Yes, she made a point of mentioning it. The cake had 5 tiers. The buffet served salmon, shrimp, things I had never tasted in my life. And I paid half of all that, $9,000 on my part. Money I saved selling linens, mending clothes, economizing at the grocery store. But I gave it. Because mothers do that, right? Mothers sacrifice. On the wedding day, Jessica barely looked at me, greeted her parents with long hugs, took 1,000 photos with friends. But with me, it was just a dry 1.5 smile. Brandon tried to include me, called me to take a photo with the two of them, but when I approached, Jessica sighed loudly and said, "Brandon, we'll take it later, okay? Right now it's just us." And he agreed. I stood there holding my little purse, feeling my heart break in half. But I swallowed it, smiled, clapped, because it was their day, not mine. After the wedding, they moved into a rented apartment in Westwood. 2 bedrooms, balcony, grill, condo with pool, a nice place. Brandon called me on the first day and said, "Mom, come see our house." I got all excited. I brought a carrot cake I had made, wrapped in aluminum foil still warm. When I got there, I rang the doorbell. Jessica opened the door in a robe looking sleepy. "Oh, Eleanor, didn't Brandon tell you we were going out?" I froze, but he called me yesterday, asking me to come. She huffed. "Yeah, but plans changed. Today doesn't work." Brandon appeared behind her, looking kind of sheepish. "Sorry, Mom. I forgot we had scheduled lunch with Jessica's parents." I held the cake, which was already cooling in my hand, and said, "Oh, okay. Let me leave this here for you then." Jessica took the cake carelessly, didn't even thank me properly, and closed the door. I went home with a knot in my throat that wouldn't go down, and things only got worse. Visits started to be scheduled. I could no longer call and say, "Son, I'm going to stop by." No, I had to call ahead, ask if I could, confirm the time, as if I were a doctor's appointment. And even then, many times I would call and Jessica would make up an excuse. "Oh, Eleanor, today the house is a mess. Today doesn't work, we're going out. Brandon's tired. Better leave it for another day." Another day that never came. I started to feel disposable. Like an old piece of clothing you keep in the back of the closet and never wear again, but also don't have the courage to throw away. Then came Sophie. When Jessica got pregnant, I was over the moon. I was going to be a grandmother, have a little granddaughter to make clothes for, tell stories to, hold. I already started sewing little things, cotton onesies, crochet blankets, tiny hats. I saved everything in a box decorated with pink wrapping paper, waiting for the day to deliver them. But when Sophie was born, I couldn't be there. Jessica made it clear. Her mother was going to stay at the hospital helping. There was no room for me. Too many people gets in the way, Eleanor. You understand, right? I said I understood, but inside I was falling apart. When I finally got to see my granddaughter, she was already 3 weeks old. 3 weeks. I arrived at their house with the box of gifts, my heart racing. Jessica received me, took the box without even opening it, and said, "She's sleeping. Better you don't hold her, or she'll wake up." I sat there on the living room couch, looking at the bedroom door, imagining my little granddaughter sleeping on the other side. I stayed for an hour. Sophie didn't wake up, or she did wake up, and Jessica didn't call me, I don't know. But I went home without even having touched her. The visits continued like that, controlled, timed, as if I were a threat. I would call to ask if I could see Sophie, and Jessica always had an excuse on the tip of her tongue. Oh, she has a fever. She's fussy today. She's at my mom's house. When I finally managed to go, I stayed half an hour, maximum. And Jessica stood there, arms crossed, watching me, as if I were going to do something wrong. One day I brought a cloth doll I had sewn. I spent 2 days making it, yellow yarn hair, blue dress with embroidered flowers, red shoes. I gave it to Sophie, who was about 2 years old at the time. She loved it, hugged the doll, and ran around the house. I was so happy, until on the next visit I didn't see the doll anywhere. I asked, "Where's the little doll I gave Sophie?" Jessica shrugged. "Oh, she got tired of it. We gave it to a charity. Gave it to a charity as if it were garbage." I bit my tongue, didn't say anything, but that night I cried so much I soaked the entire pillow. Brandon didn't do anything. He agreed with everything Jessica said. When I tried to talk to him, he cut me off. "Mom, Jessica's right. You need to understand we have our own life now." "Mom?" At least at that moment, he still called me Mom. But the tone was cold, distant, as if I were a burden he had to carry. I started to feel invisible. And then came Sophie's birthday. She was going to turn 4. I waited for the invitation. Waited, and nothing. A week before, I called. "Son, what time is Sophie's party? I want to bring her a nice present." Silence on the other end of the line. Then he answered, "Mom, it's just going to be small. Just kids from her school. Nothing much. Just kids from school. I wasn't invited to my own granddaughter's birthday." I hung up the phone and just sat there in the kitchen chair, staring at nothing. There was a cornbread in the oven, the sweet smell filling the house, but I couldn't smell anything. I didn't feel anything. Just an enormous void growing inside me like a bottomless pit. 3 days later, I saw the photos on Facebook. The party was at a children's venue with a bouncy castle, ball pit, Frozen-themed decorations. There were about 50 people. Jessica's parents were there smiling, Brandon's friends taking selfies, and me, I wasn't invited. That day, something inside me started to crack. It didn't break yet, but it cracked because I realized it wasn't forgetfulness, it wasn't carelessness, it was intentional. Jessica was erasing me from my son's life, and he was letting it happen. I tried to talk to Brandon, arranged to meet him at a mall, because at his house I couldn't go anymore without scheduling in advance. I sat with him in a food court, drinking watery coffee, and said, "Son, I'm feeling like you don't want me to be part of your lives anymore." He looked away. "Mom, it's not like that. It's just Jessica thinks you interfere too much, give too many opinions, you know? Interfere." I barely saw my granddaughter, barely stepped foot in their house, but I didn't yell, didn't pound the table. I just asked with a choked voice, "And you? What do you think?" Brandon was silent. And that silence said everything. He had chosen her side. I went home that day with a painful certainty. My son was lost, and I didn't know if I could find him again. But the worst was still to come. Because 3 months after that conversation, Brandon showed up at my house, but he didn't come alone. He came with Jessica, and he came to ask for money. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the backyard watering the plants when I heard the doorbell. I opened the gate and got a shock. Brandon and Jessica, both dressed up, smiling. He was holding a bag from the bakery. "We brought cheese bread, Mom, the kind you like." It had been months since they had come here, and now they showed up like this out of nowhere, with cheese bread and smiles. Something wasn't right, but I let them in. I made coffee, put the cheese bread on a plate, sat with them at the little kitchen table. Jessica was strangely nice. "Oh, Eleanor, what a cozy house. You can smell the coffee? These simple things we forget to appreciate, right?" She had never complimented anything in my house, never. And now she came with this talk. Brandon ate 2 cheese breads, drank coffee, and kept stalling. Small talk about the weather, about work, about Sophie, until Jessica nudged him with her elbow. Subtle, but I saw. He cleared his throat. Mom, actually, we came here because we need to talk about something with you. My heart tightened. Talk, son. He exchanged a look with Jessica. She gave a little encouraging smile, and then he let it out. An incredible opportunity came up, an investment. A friend of mine from the company opened an ice cream franchise and is inviting partners. It's a guaranteed business, Mom. He already has 3 stores and is expanding. It's for sure profit. I stayed quiet, waiting for him to continue. The problem is, the buy-in for the partnership is $50,000. We're saving, but we're still short. And we thought, would you be able to lend us $50,000? I felt the floor disappear from under my feet. That money was practically everything I had, my emergency fund, the money I had saved selling leftover fabrics from the workshop, doing sewing jobs here and there, saving penny by penny. It was what gave me security. The cushion for any emergency. Son, that's a lot of money. I know, Mom, but it's a loan. We'll pay it back in 6 months with interest. You'll get $55,000 back, $5,000 profit. We'll make a contract, everything proper. Jessica leaned forward with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. Eleanor, we would never ask for this if it weren't a real opportunity. We trust Brandon, and don't you trust your own son? And there was the trap. Because if I said no, I would be the bad mother, the mother who doesn't believe in her son, the selfish mother who prefers money sitting in the bank instead of helping family. I looked at Brandon, at my son, the boy I raised alone, who I clothed, who I fed, who I paid for college by selling the apartment that was my only asset. I looked in his eyes and saw a man I didn't recognize anymore. But I also saw the 6-year-old boy who cried in my lap on the day of his father's funeral. Let me think, son. Jessica frowned. Think, Eleanor? The opportunity is now. If we let it pass, we lose it. Another partner will come in instead. Brandon held her hand in a gesture that seemed to say, calm down. But then he looked at me and said with that little boy voice I couldn't resist, Mom, I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. You always said you wanted to see me grow, succeed. This is the chance. I took a deep breath and made the biggest mistake of my life. Okay, I'll lend it. Jessica's smile was immediate, wide, triumphant. Brandon's was more contained, but there was relief. He got up, came to me, hugged me. Thank you, Mom. You won't regret it, I promise. 3 days later, I transferred the $50,000 to his account. We made a simple contract that Jessica herself typed and printed. Loan of $50,000 to be returned in 6 months with 10% interest, totaling $55,000. They both signed. I signed. I put the paper in the drawer with a tightness in my chest I tried to ignore. In the first 2 months, they were nice. Brandon called once a week. So, Mom, everything okay? Jessica even sent me a photo of Sophie via WhatsApp. I held back from seeming too needy, but responded full of heart emojis. But in the 3rd month, the calls became rare. When I called, Brandon answered quickly, rushed. Mom, I'm at work. I'll call you back later. And he didn't call back. In the 4th month, I started to get worried. Not about the money yet, but about the distance. It was as if after getting what they wanted, I had become invisible again. And then the 6th month arrived, the loan deadline. I waited. Didn't charge right away. Waited a week, 2. When 15 days passed, I called. Brandon answered, but was dry. Hi, Mom. Son, it's been more than 6 months since the loan. Silence. Mom, the business is going well, but we haven't been able to take out the profit yet. Need a little more time. How much time? I don't know. About 3 months, maybe. I swallowed hard. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into 8. And every time I asked, Brandon had an excuse. The franchise is in adjustment phase. We invested in renovations. It's almost there, Mom. And Jessica? When I asked her, it was even worse. Eleanor, you're being anxious. Business doesn't give returns overnight. Relax, relax. I had lent practically everything I had, and they were telling me to relax. But the worst hadn't happened yet, because 8 months after the loan, I discovered something that made me fall to my knees on the kitchen floor. I was at the market buying vegetables when Mrs. Martinez, my neighbor, came to talk to me. Eleanor, I saw your son the other day. What a beautiful car he bought, a brand new Camry. I froze. Black car, 0 miles. It was parked in front of his building. I saw it when I was passing by visiting my sister. I went home with my legs shaking. I went on Facebook. I hardly used it, but I had created an account just to see photos of Sophie, and there it was, a photo of Brandon next to a black Camry, smiling with the caption, "New achievement, God is faithful." $40,000. I researched. A new Camry cost around that. They had bought a car with my money. I felt my chest tighten so much I thought I was having a heart attack. I sat on the floor, leaned my head against the wall, and let the tears fall. Because it wasn't just about the money, it was about the betrayal, about the lie, about looking me in the eyes and deceiving me, knowing I had sold my apartment to pay for his college. The next day I called. I was determined to confront. Brandon answered lazily. "What, Mom?" I saw the photo of the car. Silence. "So what? So what?" My voice came out shaky. "Brandon, you owe me $50,000. How do you buy a car for almost $40,000? Mom, the car was financed, and it's my problem what I do with my money. My money, not his money, mine. And he knew it. But son, you promised to return it in 6 months. I'm going to return it. Stop pressuring me. You're acting like a loan shark. Loan shark." He called me a loan shark. I hung up the phone and just sat there in the kitchen, hearing the sound of the wall clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock, as if time had stopped. And it was there that the crack inside me widened and started to hurt. Hurt for real, because I realized it wasn't just disrespect, it was cruelty. But what I didn't know, what I didn't imagine, was that the worst of everything was still to come. After that call, I spent 3 days unable to eat properly. Stomach churning, head heavy, heart broken into so many pieces I didn't even know how to put them back together anymore. I looked at the ceiling at night and kept replaying everything in my head. Each sacrifice, each sleepless night sewing, each bill I didn't pay to make sure my son had clean clothes, food on the table, school supplies. And now? Now he called me a loan shark. I tried to convince myself it was just a moment of anger, that he would call, apologize, explain. But the days went by, 1 week, 2, 3, and nothing. Until one Saturday morning, I decided to go to his place. I didn't warn him. Didn't call ahead. I just went. I took the bus, got off in Westwood, walked to the building. My heart was beating erratically. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I needed to look my son in the eyes and understand when I lost him. I arrived at the condo gate. The security guard recognized me. I had been there a few times. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Eleanor. Going to visit Brandon?" I forced a smile. "Yes." He picked up the intercom, called the apartment, waited. No one answered. Strange, his car's in the garage. He tried again. Nothing. I asked, "Let me go up, please. I'm his mother." The guard hesitated, but ended up letting me through. I went up in the elevator, legs trembling. I got to apartment 504, took a deep breath, rang the doorbell. I heard voices inside, laughter, the TV on. Rang again. Jessica opened the door. She was in sweatpants, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. When she saw me, her face closed immediately. "Eleanor, what are you doing here? I came to talk to Brandon. He's busy." "Jessica, I just want to talk. 5 minutes." She sighed, rolling her eyes. "Brandon," she yelled down the hall. "Your mother's here." My mother, not Eleanor. My mother. But the way she said it was like it was a burden. Brandon appeared in shorts and a t-shirt looking sleepy. When he saw me, he frowned. "Mom, you didn't say you were coming." "I know, son, but we need to talk." He exchanged a look with Jessica. She crossed her arms, leaned against the doorframe, and just stood there, staring at me. Didn't invite me in. The three of us stood there at the door as if I were a door-to-door salesperson. "Son, I wanted to understand about the money. It's been more than 8 months. You said you'd return it in 6. Brandon huffed. "Mom, I already said. The business is ongoing. Can't take money out now. But you bought a car. I already explained that. The car was financed." "But, Brandon, I lent you everything I had. I need that money. I have bills. Jessica cut me off. "Eleanor, we have bills too. We have a daughter. You think it's easy raising a kid? Everything is expensive. School, clothes, doctor. You need to stop thinking only about yourself." "Only about myself?" I felt a wave of heat rise through my body. "Jessica, I'm not thinking only about myself. I just want what's mine." "What's yours?" She gave a dry laugh. "You lent to your son. It wasn't an investment. It wasn't a donation. It was a loan. We'll pay it back when we can, but constantly charging, that's embarrassing." Embarrassing. I looked at Brandon, expecting him to say something, that he would defend me, that he would remember everything I did. But he just looked at the floor, and it was in that silence that something inside me broke completely. "Okay?" My voice came out low, shaky. "Sorry to bother you." I turned my back and left. I heard the door close behind me before I even got to the elevator. I went down slowly, left the building, walked to the bus stop, and when I sat on the bench alone with the sun burning on my head, I finally understood. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a creditor, a number on a sheet of paper. 3 days later, the worst happened. It was a Thursday. I was in front of the house sweeping the sidewalk when I saw Sophie playing in the street with other children. My heart jumped. It had been months since I'd seen my granddaughter up close. She was bigger, hair longer, wearing a pink dress with a unicorn design. I dropped the broom and went to her. "Sophie, my love." She looked at me kind of awkwardly, but smiled. "Hi, Grandma." I knelt in front of her, held her little hands. "How are you?" "Missed Grandma." Sophie hugged me, and in that tight hug, I felt there was still love, there was still connection. That's when I heard his voice. "Sophie, come here." Brandon and Jessica were walking down the sidewalk, he with a closed face, she with that look of irritation. Sophie ran to them. Brandon took her hand and looked at me. "Mom, we already talked about this. You can't just show up out of nowhere to talk to Sophie." "Show up out of nowhere, Brandon. She was playing here on the street." I just said hello. Jessica butted in. "Eleanor, you don't respect boundaries. We already said. If you want to see Sophie, you have to let us know beforehand." Neighbors started coming out of their houses, curious about the argument. Mrs. Martinez was at the window. Mr. O'Brien stopped washing the car to look, and I felt the shame rising hot, burning on my face. "Son, I just wanted to see my granddaughter." "Your granddaughter?" Jessica's voice came sharp. "Eleanor, you think just because you're a grandmother, you can do whatever you want? Sophie is our daughter, our responsibility, and we decide when you can or can't see her." I blinked, trying to hold back tears. "Brandon, say something." He looked at me, and in that look, I saw the man he had become. A man I didn't know, a man who chose the wrong side. And then he opened his mouth. "Woman, go live your own life. Leave ours alone." The world stopped. The children stopped playing. The neighbors went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Woman. My son called me a woman in front of everyone. I just stood there, my hand still gripping the handle of my floral fabric purse. The one I had sewn myself, the one that was worn at the edges, faded by time. My eyes didn't cry in that moment, but they said everything. They said that something inside me had just died. Brandon picked Sophie up and left. Jessica gave me one last look, a victorious look, and went after him. I stood there alone, with the sound of leaves being carried by the wind, with the embarrassed silence of the neighbors, with shame burning my skin. I went inside the house, closed the door, leaned against it, and finally let the tears fall. I cried like I hadn't cried since the day I buried Thomas. I cried for everything I gave, for everything I gave up, for everything I sacrificed, and for the son I lost. But that night, after the tears dried, after the pain transformed into something else, something cold, something decided, I got up from bed, turned on the kitchen light, and went to the cabinet. Up high, behind some medicine boxes, there was an old shoebox. I opened it. Inside were all the proofs, the receipts from Brandon's college, all 4 years, $190,000 in installments I paid, sweating, cutting fabric, sewing at dawn. The deed to the apartment I sold, the only thing my mother left me, and that I traded for his future. Photos of me, younger, tired, exhausted, but always smiling, always trying. And the contract, that damn loan contract, $50,000, signed by him, by her, by me. I looked at those papers, and in that moment I made a decision, cold, calculated, irreversible. If they wanted me to live my life, then that's what I was going to do, but not the way they imagined. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the shoebox open in front of me, looking at each paper, each photo, each proof of a lifetime of sacrifice. And as the sky lightened outside, a different clarity was born inside me. It wasn't anger. I had already felt anger. This was something else. It was determination. I had spent my whole life giving myself, annulling myself, accepting crumbs of affection. And the result? Being called a woman in front of the neighbors, being treated like a nuisance, being deceived and robbed by my own son. But it was over. That morning, when the sun rose, a new Eleanor was also born. One who wasn't going to cry anymore. One who wasn't going to beg anymore. One who was finally going to take the reins of her own life. The first thing I did was stop calling Brandon. It seems simple, but for me it was one of the hardest things, because every mother has that impulse, to call, to ask how they are, to try to fix it. But I cut it off. I blocked the impulse, put the phone in the drawer, and pretended he didn't exist. 3 days passed, a week. Brandon called once. I answered, but was dry. Hello? He seemed surprised by the tone. Mom, is everything okay? I answered. Yes. Do you need something? He stuttered. No, I was just calling to see how you are. I'm fine. Anything else? Silence. No, that's all. Okay then, bye. I hung up and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. In the following days, I organized my documents, took all the papers, put them in a clear folder, and looked for a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I wanted someone who understood family law, debt collection, justice. I found Dr. Morrison, small office, but with a good reputation. I made an appointment and went. She received me in a simple room with a desk full of cases and a smell of old coffee. But her look was sharp, attentive. I liked her right away, told her everything. From beginning to end, the apartment sold, the college paid, the loan, the lies, the car, the public humiliation. She was taking notes without interrupting, and when I finished, she looked at me over her glasses and said, Mrs. Eleanor, you have a strong case, very strong. My heart raced. This contract here is valid, and since the deadline has passed, you can file a collection lawsuit. With interest and monetary correction, the amount goes up to $65,000. $65,000. And there's more. She continued. If he refuses to pay, we can request seizure of assets, including the car. I took a deep breath. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about showing my son that actions have consequences, that mothers aren't banks, that respect is not negotiable. Let's move forward, I said. Dr. Morrison smiled. Great. I'll prepare everything. I left that office with my spine straighter, with my head held high. For the first time in months, I felt I was no longer a victim. I was reacting. But it wasn't just about the lawsuit. There was something else. I went home and made a call to Ireland, to my cousin Delia. Delia had moved to Dublin about 10 years ago when she married an Irishman. We always kept in touch, but from a distance. Birthday call, Christmas message, those things. But that day I called for another reason. Eleanor, what a surprise. Her voice came cheerful with that mixed accent. Half American, half Irish. "Delia, I need a favor." I explained everything, the situation with Brandon, the disrespect, the humiliation, and what I was planning. She was silent for a while, then said, "Cousin, you know you can always count on me. If you want to come here, my house is yours. Are you sure?" "I don't want to be trouble." "Trouble, Eleanor? You helped me when I needed it most. Remember when my mom got sick? And you sewed that whole baby layette for me to sell and raise money for the medicine?" I never forgot. "Come, please. Come start over here." I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. "I will, but don't tell anyone yet, okay? This is a secret. Secret kept." I hung up and just sat there on the living room couch, looking at the walls of my little house. Those walls had seen me cry, seen me sweat, seen me age, but now they were going to see me leave. In the following days, I started preparing in silence, without fanfare, sold some furniture, not all, so as not to raise suspicion, but the old sewing machine, the broken bookshelf, some chairs I didn't use. I advertised in Facebook groups, in classifieds. Money came in little by little. I donated clothes to a neighborhood charity. I separated the ones I really used and saved them in a small suitcase. The rest, out. I was detaching, and each thing I donated, each piece of furniture I sold, was like I was taking a weight off my shoulders. In parallel, Dr. Morrison was moving forward with the lawsuit. She called me to give updates. "Mrs. Eleanor, I filed the suit today. Your son will be notified in a few days." I thanked her, my heart beating hard. And then, 3 weeks after that humiliation on the sidewalk, I looked for an accountant. Mr. Reynolds, a man of about 60 years, thick glasses, and patient manner. He helped me organize everything. Income tax, retirement, transfer of documents, everything proper, everything legal. "You're going to live abroad for how long?" he asked. "I don't know. Maybe forever." He looked at me curiously, but didn't ask anything else. Just did his job. I bought the ticket. Direct flight. Chicago, Dublin. Date, 1 week from now. 1 week. My heart tightened when I confirmed the purchase. Because it was real. It was happening. I was leaving the country, leaving everything, including my son. But he wasn't my son anymore. Not the way I knew him. He had become someone else. And I needed to become someone else too. During those days, Brandon called twice. Both times I was polite but distant. Didn't mention the lawsuit, didn't mention the trip, didn't give any hint. Just said everything was fine, that I was taking care of my life. And he, innocent or arrogant enough not to notice, thought everything was normal. 3 days before the trip, I received a call from Dr. Morrison, "Mrs. Eleanor, he was notified." The notification arrived today. My stomach churned. And now? Now he has a deadline to respond. He'll probably try to contact you, but don't worry. I'll take care of everything from here. You can go in peace. In peace. I don't know if I was in peace, but I was decided. The night before the trip, I did one last thing. I sat at the kitchen table, took paper and pen, and wrote a letter. It wasn't easy. I had to rewrite it 3 times because the words needed to be right. They needed to hurt, but they also needed to free. And when I finished, I folded the paper, put it inside a white envelope, and wrote on the front, "For Brandon." I left it on the table. The next morning, I packed my suitcase, just one, small, with the essentials. I looked around one last time. The simple little house, the backyard with the fruit tree, the kitchen where I sewed so many clothes, where I cried so many tears. I locked the door, left the key with Mrs. Martinez, who cried when I said I was traveling for a while. "Take care of the house for me, Mrs. Martinez. And when my son comes asking, give him this." I gave her the envelope, took a taxi, went to the airport, checked in, boarded, and when the plane took off and I saw Chicago getting small down there, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in 70 years, I was living just for myself. And that wasn't selfishness, it was survival. The flight lasted 10 hours. 10 hours where I didn't sleep a single minute. I kept looking out the little window, seeing the ocean down there, dark, infinite, and thinking about everything I was leaving behind, thinking about what awaited me ahead. When the plane landed in Dublin, the sun was rising. I got off with shaky legs, racing heart, and there, in the middle of that airport, full of people speaking differently, with signs in English, but not exactly my English, I had a second of panic. What had I done? But then I saw her, Delia, standing there at arrivals, holding an improvised sign with my name. When our eyes met, she dropped the sign and came running, hugged me tight, and I smelled her perfume, felt the warmth of that hug, and everything became less scary. Welcome, cousin. Welcome to your new life. I cried right there, in the middle of the airport. The first few days were about adapting. Delia's house was small, but cozy, in a neighborhood called Drumcondra, with cobblestone streets and old buildings. She and her husband, Patrick, welcomed me like family. They set up a little room for me, with a single bed, a closet, and a window that looked out onto the inner courtyard where an apple tree grew. I tried to keep busy, helped with household chores, cooked, went out for walks. But my head was always in Chicago, imagining what was happening if Brandon had already received the letter, if he had looked for his mother. 3 weeks after my arrival, I received the call. It was Dr. Morrison. Mrs. Eleanor, I have news. My heart raced. Speak. I received a call from a woman. She said she worked with Jessica and has important information for you. I frowned. What kind of information? She didn't want to talk on the phone, but said it's about the money, about the supposed investment. A chill ran down my spine. Give me her contact. Dr. Morrison gave me a cell phone number. I hung up, took a deep breath, and called. A female voice answered, young, kind of nervous. Hello? Hi, it's Eleanor. The lawyer gave me your contact. You said you have information? Silence on the other end. Then she spoke. Mrs. Eleanor, my name is Amy. I worked with Jessica at the cosmetic store. About 6 months ago, I was unfairly fired, actually. And since then, I've been thinking about whether or not I should tell this. Tell what? I heard her take a deep breath. The investment, the supposed ice cream franchise, never existed. The floor disappeared from under my feet. What do you mean? It never existed, Mrs. Eleanor. I heard Jessica talking to her friends at the store a few months ago. She was laughing, telling how she had convinced Brandon to ask you for money. She said the money was to renovate the apartment and buy the car, and that you had fallen for it perfectly. I felt my hand shake so much I almost dropped the phone. Renovate the apartment? Yes. They changed all the flooring, put in custom cabinets in the kitchen, redid the bathroom, and bought the car, the Camry, all with your money. She spoke with so much disdain, as if you were a fool. Fool. I closed my eyes. Delia's living room spun around me. Amy, do you have a way to prove this? I recorded one of the conversations. At the time, I was suspicious she was plotting to fire me, so I started recording some things. And that day, without meaning to, I caught that conversation too. I can send you the audio if you want. Send it, please. 5 minutes later, my phone beeped. An audio file. I put in my headphones, pressed play, and heard Jessica's voice, clear, unmistakable. Guys, you don't know what I pulled off. I convinced Brandon to ask his mother for a loan. I told that investment story, that franchise tale. She fell for it perfectly. $50,000. Now I'm renovating the whole apartment. It's going to be luxurious. And there's still money left for the car. The annoying old woman can stop showing up here all the time now. At least she was good for something. Laughter in the background, female voices agreeing, commenting, and Jessica's voice again. Seriously, guys, mother-in-law is tough, but this one now can stay put, quiet, waiting for the money that's never coming back. More laughter. The audio ended. I took off the headphones. I just sat there on the edge of the bed, hands on my knees, trying to process. There never was an investment. There never was a franchise. It was all a lie. From the beginning, they looked me in the eyes, sat at my table, ate the cheese bread I bought, and lied coldly, calculatedly. And Brandon? Did Brandon know? Had he known from the start? Or had Jessica manipulated him too? But then I remembered. I remembered him saying, "It's my problem what I do with my money." I remembered him calling me a loan shark. I remembered him yelling in the street, "Woman, go live your own life." He knew and didn't care. I called Amy back. "Can you send that audio to my lawyer? I'll give you the contact." "Of course, Mrs. Eleanor. And I'm really sorry." I hung up. I immediately called Dr. Morrison, told her everything, sent the audio. She listened, was silent, and then said with a firm voice, "This changes everything. This isn't just debt collection, this is fraud. You can also sue criminally." No. The word came out fast, instinctive. I don't want a criminal lawsuit, don't want to see my son in jail. Just want my money back, with interest, with correction, and I want him to understand what he did was wrong. Dr. Morrison took a deep breath. "I understand. So we'll use this audio as evidence in the civil suit. It's going to strengthen the case a lot. He won't have anywhere to run." I hung up and just sat there looking at the white bedroom wall. That information didn't break me because I was already broken a long time ago. But it gave me something I needed. Clarity. I hadn't lost my son by accident. I hadn't lost him because he fell in love with the wrong person. I lost him because he chose to lose me, chose to use me, chose to discard me, and that choice was his. That night, I sat in Delia's backyard under the apple tree and looked at the sky. The stars here were different, or maybe they were the same, but I was looking with different eyes. I cried, but not like before. This time the tears were of liberation, because I had finally understood. It wasn't about the money, it never was. It was about dignity, about worth, about learning that loving someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. And I had learned that night I slept. I slept deeply for the first time since I left the United States. And when I woke up the next day, with the sun hitting the window and the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen, I knew I was going to be okay. Not because of the lawsuit, not because of the justice that would come, but because I had made the most important decision of my life. I had chosen myself. But before I tell you how everything ended, I need to go back a bit. Go back to that day, the day I left the letter. Because while I was here in Dublin, discovering the truth, dealing with the pain and trying to rebuild my life, there, in the United States, a bomb exploded in Brandon's life. It was Mrs. Martinez who told me later. She called 3 days after I arrived in Ireland to let me know Brandon had shown up. "Eleanor, your son came here looking for you. He was desperate. Asked where you were when you were coming back. I gave him the letter like you asked. My heart tightened and what did he do? He opened it right there on the sidewalk. Read it and his face, Eleanor. I've never seen someone turn so white. His hands were shaking. He tried to call me on the intercom, but I said you had traveled and didn't know when you were coming back. He left here stumbling, like he had been punched." I hung up with a heavy heart and kept imagining the scene. Brandon reading that letter. Brandon finally understanding what he had done. Let me tell you what I wrote. Because those words I weighed each one, each comma, each period. Brandon, if you're reading this, it's because you finally took the trouble to look for me. I don't know if it was out of worry or necessity, but it doesn't matter. I'm not there anymore. I spent 3 days thinking about what to tell you. I thought about yelling, about cursing, about throwing in your face every penny I spent, every night I didn't sleep, every time I cried for you. But no, that would be too easy. And I'm tired of making things easy for you. So, I'm going to tell you a story. The story of a woman who was widowed at 32 years old, with a 6-year-old son, no profession, no money, no future, but who didn't give up, who took an old sewing machine and transformed it into a life, who worked until her fingers bled, who skipped meals so you could eat, who sold the only asset she had, an apartment that was my inheritance, my security, to pay for your college. $190,000, Brandon, that's what your diploma cost. It wasn't your effort. It wasn't your intelligence. It was your mother's apartment, the one I sold without thinking twice, because I believed in you, because I thought you were worth more than bricks. I raised you alone, taught you values, showed you what dignity was. And you turned your back on all of that the moment you put a ring on your finger. I'm not going to blame your Jessica. It would be easy to put all the blame on her. But you're a grown man. You made choices. And one of those choices was to treat me like garbage. You lied to me, deceived me, took $50,000, practically everything I had with an investment story that never existed. Bought the car, renovated the apartment, and when I charged you, you called me a loan shark. But the worst of all wasn't the money, Brandon. It was the humiliation. It was being called a woman in front of the neighbors. It was being prevented from seeing my granddaughter. It was being treated like a nuisance in my own son's life. So, you know what I did? I decided to obey you. You told me to go live my life and leave yours in peace. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I left the country, moved abroad. I'm going to start over at 70 years old. I'm going to start from zero, because I'd rather start over alone than continue being humiliated around you. Oh, and about the money, you're going to be legally notified. I filed a collection suit. The amount, with interest and correction, is $65,000. You signed a contract. You're going to have to comply. And if you don't comply, your assets will be seized, including the car you bought with my sweat. Don't try to find me. Don't try to call me. I changed my number, deleted social media, cut all ties. You said I was a woman, and maybe you're right. I am a woman, but I'm a woman and free. Free from you, free from your ingratitude, free from your cruelty. Learn one thing, my son, because I still feel you're my son, even after everything. When you raise pigs, you can't be surprised when the pen stinks. You made choices. Now live with them. I've already chosen, and my choice is me. Goodbye, Eleanor. P.S. You can keep the money from college. Consider it a gift from a foolish mother who thought love bought respect. But the $50,000 that I want back. With interest. Mrs. Martinez told me that after reading the letter, Brandon stood on the sidewalk for about 10 minutes, just staring at the paper. And then he ran to the car, got in, and sped off. He tried to call me. My number didn't exist anymore. Tried to find me on Facebook. I had deleted everything. Called neighbors, acquaintances. Nobody knew where I was, because I didn't tell anyone except Delia. 2 days after the letter, the legal notification arrived. Dr. Morrison sent me a message. He was officially notified. Has 15 days to respond. Brandon tried contact through the lawyer, asked for my phone number. She denied it, said all communication would be done through her. He sent a message that Dr. Morrison passed on to me. Mom, please, give me a chance to explain. I messed up. I know I messed up. But we can talk. Please, don't do this. Don't sue me. We can work this out another way. I read it and didn't respond because there was nothing more to work out. There was no more conversation, there was a signed contract, and there were consequences. 2 weeks later, he tried again. Mom, I'm going to sell the car. I'll pay you in installments, but please come back. Sophie is asking about you. She misses you. Sophie. That part hurt. It hurt a lot because I loved my granddaughter, but I couldn't sacrifice myself anymore, couldn't accept crumbs anymore. I responded through the lawyer. The lawsuit continues. If he wants to settle the debt, then settle it. But that doesn't change anything between us. What was broken can't be fixed anymore. And that's how everything started to fall apart for him, because selling the car wasn't going to be enough. The car was worth $40,000, used now worth less, and he owed $65,000. Jessica, when she found out everything, the lawsuit, the letter, the audio Amy had recorded, panicked. Dr. Morrison told me they had an ugly fight. Neighbors heard shouting, Jessica accusing Brandon of being weak, of letting the old woman do this to them. Brandon yelling back, saying it was her fault, that she was the one who invented the lie. The marriage started to crack, and in the middle of it all, Sophie. My little granddaughter, only 7 years old, feeling the tension, hearing the fights, asking for the grandmother who disappeared. Mrs. Martinez told me she saw the girl crying at the gate, asking when Grandma was coming back. And I cried too. I cried because it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair for her to pay for her parents' mistakes, but I couldn't go back, couldn't erase myself again. Because if I went back, everything would go back to how it was before. I would go back to being the inconvenient old woman, the bank that lends and doesn't charge, the mother who accepts anything. And I wasn't that person anymore. I had moved, not just countries, I had moved inside. 3 months after I left the United States, I received the news. Brandon had sold the car, had taken a loan from the bank, and had settled the debt. $65,000 in my account. I looked at the statement, at the amount there deposited, and I didn't feel victory, didn't feel joy. I felt relief that it was over, that I had set boundaries, that I had shown that actions have consequences. But I felt sadness too, because that money had cost me my son, or rather, had shown who my son really was. The following months were of silence, a heavy silence, full of unsaid things. I continued in Dublin, adapting, trying to build a routine, but even thousands of miles away, the news reached me. Through neighbors, through Mrs. Martinez, who became my unofficial informant, and through Dr. Morrison herself, who kept in contact with me. Brandon's life was falling apart, and I can't lie. Part of me felt a bitter satisfaction, but another part hurt. Mrs. Martinez called me on an October afternoon. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." My heart tightened. "What happened?" "I saw Brandon yesterday. He was leaving the building by bus. He sold the car, right? But the worst is he looked, I don't know, Eleanor. He looked 10 years older, thin, unshaven, deep dark circles." I closed my eyes. "And there's more." She continued. "I heard he took a big loan from the bank to settle the debt with you. He's paying high installments, about $2,000 a month for 4 years. It's tight, very tight. $2,000 a month, almost half his salary." "And Jessica?" I asked, even knowing I shouldn't care. Mrs. Martinez sighed. "That one, she's a beast. She's charging him all the time. I've already heard loud fighting from the building. Once she yelled that she regretted marrying him, that he was a failure, that because of him they lost everything. They still had an apartment, had jobs, had health. They didn't lose everything. They lost what was never theirs, my money." "And Sophie?" My voice came out weak. "Oh, Eleanor, the poor thing, she walks around quiet, sad. I saw her the other day at the little park playing alone. The other children were running around, but she didn't want to. Just sat on the swing, still, looking at nothing." My heart broke. Sophie had no fault in any of this. She was a child who lost her grandmother because her parents were greedy and cruel. But I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go back and save everyone, because if I went back, who would save me? 2 weeks later, I received another call from Mrs. Martinez. This time, the news was even worse. "Eleanor, Brandon and Jessica separated." I was silent. It was ugly, very ugly. She took Sophie and went to live with her mother. Left him in the apartment, but said she's going to ask for high alimony. Brandon is alone now. Alone and broke. Alone and broke. The same words that described how I felt when he humiliated me on the sidewalk. The difference is, I was alone by choice. He was alone by consequence. Does he ask about me? The question came out before I could hold it back. He asks. Every time he sees me, he asks, "Mrs. Martinez, have you heard from my mother?" I say no, that you asked me not to say anything. And he lowers his head and leaves. I hung up with a lump in my throat. That night, lying in bed, looking at the ceiling, I asked myself, did I do the right thing? And the answer, even though it hurt, was yes. Because if I had stayed, if I had forgiven without consequences, everything would continue the same. Brandon would continue using me, Jessica would continue humiliating me, and I would continue dying little by little, swallowing disrespect, pretending everything was okay. I didn't save my son, but I saved myself. A month after the separation, I received a message through Dr. Morrison. Brandon had written another letter. "Mrs. Eleanor," he asked me to pass it on. "Do you want me to read it, or do you prefer I discard it?" I took a deep breath. "Read it." She read. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you care, but I need to write, even if it's just to say it to the void. I ruined everything. I know that now. Too late, but I know. When Jessica asked me to ask you for that money, she said it was just a loan, that we would pay it back quickly, that you wouldn't even notice. And I believed, or rather, I wanted to believe because it was easy. It was convenient. It was easier to take Mom's money than to work hard, save, wait. But when we bought the car, renovated the apartment, and you started to charge, I panicked, and instead of being a man, of owning up to my mistake, I turned my back. I treated you badly, I humiliated you, and I'm going to carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Jessica left me, took Sophie, said, I'm a failure, that I ruined everything, and she's right. I ruined it, but not the way she thinks. I didn't ruin the marriage, the money, the car. I ruined something much bigger. The relationship with my mother, the woman who raised me alone, who sold the apartment to pay for my college, who never spared efforts to see me well. And I repaid with ingratitude. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that, but I needed to tell you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything, for every bad word, for every disrespect, for calling you a woman, for expelling you from my life. You weren't the problem, Mom. I was. Sophie asks about you every day. She cries. She doesn't understand why Grandma disappeared. And I don't know what to tell her, because the truth is too shameful to be told. I'm not asking you to come back. I know I don't have that right. I'm just asking, I don't know, that you be happy, that you live your life like I told you to, because at least one of us deserves to be happy, and that person is you. Brandon. Dr. Morrison finished reading. She was silent, waiting for my answer. I wiped the tears that insisted on falling. Thank you for reading, but I'm not going to respond. Are you sure? I'm sure, because that letter, even sad, even full of regret, didn't change anything, didn't give back the years of humiliation, didn't erase the woman, go live your life, didn't heal the wound. It was too late. Or maybe it wasn't about being too late. It was about me having learned that forgiveness doesn't mean going back, that I could forgive deep in my heart, but didn't need to go back into his life, didn't need to sacrifice myself again. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Martinez called me for the last time. Eleanor? Brandon moved. Moved? Yes, left the apartment, must have gone back to renting something cheaper. Can't handle paying the condo fees, the loan installments, and still Sophie's alimony. He's broke, Eleanor. Really broke. I was silent. And you know what else? Yesterday I saw him at the bakery buying French bread and cold cuts. Just that. Remember when you did that? When money was tight and you bought the basics to give to little Brandon. Yes, I remembered. Now it's him living like that. Life had come full circle. The son who grew up eating bread and cold cuts because his mother sold her apartment to pay for his college was now back to bread and cold cuts, but this time by his own choices. And I was in Dublin eating fish and chips, drinking cider, watching the sunset on the River Liffey. It wasn't revenge, it was consequence. And maybe it was justice. 6 months. It had been 6 months since I had first set foot on Irish soil. 6 months since I had left behind a whole life. And you know what I discovered? That starting over has no age. It has courage. Dublin had welcomed me in a way I never expected. At first, everything was strange. The different accent, the stone streets that hurt my feet, the cold that got into my bones. But little by little, that old city, full of history, became my home. Delia introduced me to a group of American immigrants. We met every Thursday at a small cafe in the Temple Bar area. They were people like me who had left the United States for different reasons, but who carried the same homesickness. We drank coffee, ate scones, and laughed a lot. I had forgotten how good it was to laugh without weight on my conscience. 3 months after arriving, I got a job. Nothing grand. Part-time at an artisan sewing studio in the city center. The owner, Mrs. Fiona, a 75-year-old Irish woman with firm hands and a soft heart, hired me when she saw my work. "You have magic hands," she said, running her fingers over an embroidery I had done. "How long have you been sewing?" "All my life," I answered. And it was true. The salary was modest, about €900 a month, but it was mine. I didn't owe anything to anyone. I wasn't working to pay off an ungrateful son's debt. I was working for myself. I bought new clothes, not many, but some. A red wool coat I would never have had the courage to wear in the United States. A pair of ankle boots, a silk scarf, small things that made me feel alive. I started attending a walking group for seniors. Every Tuesday and Saturday we climbed up to Trinity College area, saw the city from up there, breathed fresh air. I made friends. Mrs. Teresa, Mrs. Gloria, Mr. Liam. People who didn't know me as Brandon's mother, knew me as Eleanor, just Eleanor, and that was liberating. On one of those walks, Mr. Liam, a 72-year-old widower, struck up a conversation with me. "Eleanor, you have a beautiful smile. You should smile more." I blushed. It had been decades since anyone noticed my smile. He invited me for coffee after the walk. I accepted. It wasn't romance. It was company and good company, light, without demands. I was at peace. For the first time in years, I was at peace. But life always takes turns. And on a Tuesday in November, I received a call from Dr. Morrison. "Mrs. Eleanor, I received a notification. Brandon filed a request through his lawyer." My heart raced. Request for what? He wants your contact, or at least one last conversation in person if possible. In person? He wants to come to Ireland? No, he's asking that you come back just for one day. Says it's important, that it has to do with Sophie. Sophie? The mention of my granddaughter pierced me like a knife. What happened to her? He didn't say, but insisted it's urgent, that he needs you. I was silent, the phone hot in my hand. "Mrs. Eleanor, you're not obligated to anything. You can refuse." But he seems desperate. I hung up. I spent the rest of the day thinking. I walked around Delia's house like a ghost. She noticed. "What happened, cousin?" I told her. She listened and then said, "You don't owe him anything. But what if it really is about the girl?" The night was long. I didn't sleep. I kept looking at the ceiling, replaying everything. I had sworn I wouldn't go back, that I had cut ties. But Sophie, she had no fault. She was innocent. The next day, I called Dr. Morrison, tell him I accept a conversation, but it's going to be in a public place, and you're going to be present. "Yes, ma'am." I bought the ticket. Chicago, just round trip. 3 days in the United States, just that. When the plane landed at O'Hare, I felt a tightness in my chest. The smell, the heat, the noise. Everything brought back good and bad memories. But I wasn't going back to stay. I was going back to close a cycle. The meeting was scheduled at a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue, mid-afternoon, high traffic, safe. I arrived first. Dr. Morrison was already there waiting for me. "Mrs. Eleanor, ready?" "No, but let's go." Brandon arrived 15 minutes later, and when I saw him, my God, he was unrecognizable. Thin, long beard, deep dark circles, wrinkled clothes. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 6 months. He saw me, stopped. His eyes filled with tears right away. "Mom." His voice came out broken. I took a deep breath. I didn't get up, didn't run to hug him. I stayed seated, firm. He approached slowly, like someone approaching a scared animal. He sat in front of me. We were silent for a few seconds that seemed eternal. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. I didn't respond. He took a deep breath. I don't even know where to start. I know I don't deserve anything. I know I hurt you in a way that has no forgiveness. But Sophie, Mom, Sophie's not well." My heart tightened. "What happened?" "She has childhood depression. At least that's what the psychologist said. She's not eating right, not playing, barely talking. She just asks about you. Every night, before sleeping, she asks, 'Dad, where's Grandma?' And I don't know what to answer." Tears started falling down his face. She made a drawing at school. The teacher called me to show me. It was a house, and inside the house there were 3 people, me, her, and you. She drew you, Mom, with white hair, smiling. And underneath, she wrote, "I want my grandma back." I felt my throat close. The psychologist said she needs closure, that she doesn't understand why you disappeared. She thinks she did something wrong, that you don't like her anymore. Tears started falling from my face too. I didn't come here to ask you to come back into my life, Mom. I know I don't have that right. I'm just asking you to see her once, to explain to her that it wasn't her fault, that you still love her because she's suffering and she doesn't deserve this. I wiped the tears, looked at him, and for the first time saw a man truly sorry. Where is she? With Jessica, at her ex-mother-in-law's house. Call her, schedule it, I want to see my granddaughter. The next day, I met Sophie at a little park near Jessica's house. Jessica brought her, but stayed far away, leaning against a car, arms crossed. Brandon stayed with me. When Sophie saw me, she stopped, just staring as if she didn't believe it, and then she ran. Ran with her little skinny legs, eyes wide, hair flying. Grandma. I knelt down, and she threw herself in my arms. I held her so tight I thought I would break her. I smelled her hair, felt her warm little body against mine, and cried. I cried everything I had been holding in. Grandma, you came back? You came back? I came back, my love. I came back. We stayed there hugging for a time I can't measure. Could have been a minute, could have been an hour. When I finally let go, I looked in her brown eyes. Sophie, Grandma needs to explain something to you. She nodded, eyes still full of tears. Grandma had to go away because sometimes grown-ups fight. And when that happens, we need time. But this wasn't your fault. Never was. Do you understand? But you don't like me anymore? I love you more than anything in this world. You're my little granddaughter, and nothing will ever change that. She hugged me again, and we stayed there playing, talking, laughing for 3 hours. When it was time to leave, Sophie held my hand. Grandma, are you going to disappear again? I took a deep breath. Grandma's going to live far away, but we're going to talk by video, okay? Every week, and maybe you can come visit me. There are big planes that cross the ocean, and where I am, there are castles, there's the sea. There are beautiful things. Her eyes shone. Really? Really, she smiled. A real smile. And when I left, when I looked back and saw her waving, saw Brandon next to her with his hand on his daughter's shoulder, I felt I had done the right thing. I went back to Dublin the next day, and when the plane took off, I didn't look back. Brandon and I exchanged a few messages after. Few, polite. He sent me photos of Sophie. I responded with little hearts. We had some kind of truce. It wasn't complete forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was closure. 6 months later, I used half of the money I had recovered and donated it to an institution that helped seniors in vulnerable situations in the United States. $32,000. Because I didn't need all of that, and because I wanted something good to come out of all that pain. The other half I kept for myself, for my future, for my emergencies, because for the first time in my life, I was thinking about myself. Today, at 70 years old, I wake up early, have coffee with Delia, go to work at the studio, sew, embroider, talk to clients, go home, video call with Sophie once a week, go for walks, drink wine with friends, laugh, live. And you know what's the best part? I'm happy. It's not a perfect happiness. It still hurts. Sometimes I still miss the son I raised, not the man he became. I still cry some nights, but the next day I get up, open the window, see the sun hitting Dublin's colorful doors, and I'm thankful because I learned the most important lesson of my life. Respect is not begged for, it's earned or abandoned. I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because I was strong. Strong enough to choose myself. Strong enough not to accept crumbs. Strong enough to start over at 70 years old in a foreign country. And if you're listening to me now, if you're going through something similar, if you're being disrespected, used, humiliated by someone you love, listen to what I have to tell you. You don't need to erase yourself to be loved. Real love doesn't hurt, doesn't humiliate, doesn't diminish, and never, never is it too late to start over. Because respect has no age, dignity has no expiration date. And today, I live my life like my son told me to, but this time surrounded by those who value me. If this account touched your heart, if you also believe it's never too late to choose yourself, leave a comment telling where you're watching from. Write also what you felt hearing this story. Tell me, have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you love? And if this story made you reflect, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to continue following real stories of women who chose their dignity. Because here we don't tell victim stories, we tell stories of new beginnings, a hug from Dublin. And remember, you are stronger than you think. The end.